All right, Dr. Donnie has scrubbed in. He is ready to give you the diagnosis for George Kittle, who surprisingly missed last week's game at home for San Francisco, a huge NFC West divisional duel against the Seattle Seahawks. Of course, the Seahawks and Geno Smith, a late drive scoring a touchdown in the final 15 seconds of regulation to steal a victory on the road in Santa Clara. George Kittle was out for the game. Numerous defensive injuries, including Nick Bosa getting banged up midway through the game as well. It's been the story of the season for San Francisco, DRS. The countless injuries the 49ers have had to face. It's part of the reason they are 5-5. But George Kittle telling reporters yesterday at practice ahead of an old NFC rivalry renewed this week in Lambeau against Green Bay, quote, "I will be playing on Sunday. Very excited. Can't pass up playing the Packers. I will be out there for sure." End quote. Is George Kittle, Dr. Donnie, as good to go as he indicates that he is?
All right, he can be out there, like just from prior experience. My senior year in college, I tore my hamstring. I started every single game for 4 years, tore it. I missed one game and played the final 3 games of my senior year with a completely black left leg on the hamstring. I could barely hobble around, but you can be out there. That's true. How effective you're going to be, that's another story. And also, let's play the long game here. Do you know why he's coming back so quickly here? Look at the 49ers record. Look at who they're going to be playing over the next couple weeks. Every game is so paramount. You're telling me right now, instead of 5-5 and they were 8-2, George Kittle takes 2-3 weeks off and goes, you know what? I'll be back fully healthy for the playoff run. That's the issue I worry about, playing and continue to play through something that you probably shouldn't be doing. Even here in Philadelphia, Devontae Smith has been hobbled for a couple weeks with a hamstring injury, not practicing much during the week, trying to give it a go during game day. Look at his numbers here. The hamstring injury is so tough on an athlete with quick twitch, specifically tight ends and wide receivers. Yes, they can play, but come on now. If you're not running your routes at least 80%, what are you actually doing out there? So yes, I do believe George Kittle believes he's going to play. How effective he will be, that's another story.
Yeah, and that's really going to be the question, DRS. And they can ill afford to lose football games. But frankly, Donnie, this is a big one, right? All the divisional tiebreakers and conference tiebreakers and a rivalry, and you really can't put yourself behind the 8 ball falling to 5-6 in week number 12. But the Niners' best path is through the NFC West. In fact, every team in that division to win the division right now is paramount because 3 teams, including the Niners, Rams, and Seahawks, all 5-5. The Cardinals, the only team above 500 at 6-4. But here's what's really interesting. Knowing San Francisco's struggles and how injured they are on either side of the football, this would be the first time since the 2022 NFC Championship game as a very slight underdog in Philadelphia that the Niners would be booked as a dog, a favorite in every single game last year, including Super Bowl 58 against the Chiefs, a favorite in every single game this year as well. But the Niners will enter Green Bay, as of this moment, getting points against the Pack.
Still shows you how much respect that the odds makers are giving the San Francisco 49ers. Green Bay is a good football team. Green Bay is at home. And the fact that the Niners are coming in not playing good football and 500 and still only getting 1.5 points as opposed to 3.5 or 4 points, that shows you how still scared they are that the Niners can turn it on at any moment. But if we're being honest, once again, that Ayuk injury, we say, oh, okay, they have plenty of other players here. That was a massive blow to that offense. And now you're saying Deebo Samuel can't step up as being that Swiss Army knife because you're focused more on him. And now George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in football, is hobbled by an injury. Christian McCaffrey coming back. He still doesn't look as explosive as he was. It's only normal that the San Francisco 49ers are going to take a downshift in this season, but the odds makers still keep propping them back up as if they should win the NFC East. They should be, NFC West, and they should be an NFC power. And also this weekend, legitimately probably should win this game. Only roughly a pick 'em, it feels like now in this game.
And DRS, the concern for me is not offensively for San Francisco. It's defensively to see if Nick Bosa is going to play or how effective he will be with the numerous other defensive injuries the Niners have. Now here's a conversation around a former Giants quarterback because Eli Manning, along with Luke Kuechly, Terrell Suggs, Earl Thomas, Adam Vinatieri, Marshall Yanda, are first-year eligible candidates among the 25 modern-era players who are semifinalists for the Hall of Fame's class of 2025. The age-old debate, is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer or a first-ballot Hall of Famer? What does Donnie Rightside say?
If his name was Eli Smith, he doesn't make it into the Hall of Fame. Maybe makes it in 25 years with the veteran committee. And I'm not trying to slander Eli Manning. 17 and 117. When I think of the greatest players of all time, Eli doesn't pop up. And quite frankly, Eli was never the best quarterback in his division at any time throughout his career. It's not a Hall of Fame.
We'll continue that on the other side of the break. Hour 2 next. Opening hour of the early line. Not a lot of football. Hour number 2 on this Thursday. A ton of football, exclusively football to get you ready for week number 12 that kicks off tonight in Cleveland. Should be a blustery, cold, and rainy night. That's AFC North football, buddy, between the Browns and the Steelers. Pittsburgh atop the division at 8-2, winners of 5 consecutive games. We'll set the stage for Thursday night football. All the players, the props, and everything that you need to know that will dictate the outcome to start week number 12. Mark Zinno will join us later on in this second hour to talk to you about the game of the year. Number 5 in college football. It's Ohio State in Indiana on Saturday in Columbus. Elsewhere around the SEC. More Thursday night football thoughts. That's how you do it, DRS, here on a Thursday in hour number 2.
Exactly. And talking yesterday about the college football playoff rankings that came out, I could care less who got the buys. I'm just focused on where we're going to get some of these home games. And you're telling me that we have some absolute bangers if the season ended today of what we would get, where Alabama would be on the road in some cold weather. I mean, sign me up. I cannot wait to get there. But we still have a couple more weeks to let things play out, including that Ohio State-Indiana game kicking off at noon. Geniuses out there. Yeah. Geniuses putting that on at noon.
The biggest fan of big noon kickoffs in the history of college football. It is that man right there in Donnie Wright's side. DRS, before we preview tonight's Thursday night football game between the Browns and the Steelers, did just want to wrap up the conversation around Eli Manning. It is one of those debates you have had with your buddies or your group chat many a time in the last decade. Eli Manning is one of 6 quarterbacks in the history of the National Football League to have multiple Lombardi trophies. He's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP as well. Maybe not multiple Lombardi trophies, but Super Bowl MVPs. Joe Frizo, can we get some clarification on that? Or is it multiple Super Bowl championships?
Yeah.
MVP.
Yes,
Thank
both.
you very much.
Yeah.
4-time Pro Bowler for Eli Manning as well. The number's pretty good, but rather mediocre in comparison in terms of the win-loss record in all that Eli Manning was able to accomplish. Of course, his name carries a lot of weight in the lore of National Football League history as well. 57,023 passing yards, 11th most all-time. But a lot of people from this generation of the National Football League will rank in the top 5, top 10, top 20 in terms of passing yards and passing touchdowns. Now, Donnie, the question, I don't actually know if is Eli Manning a Hall of Famer, but is Eli Manning a first ballot Hall of Famer? You would say no. Do you think eventually Eli Manning, understanding who he is and what his name means to the NFL, will be in the Hall of Fame when all is said and done?
1,000%, because once I understood that the Hall of Fame was a business and not just getting in on merit for most of the time, he's going to get in. The Giants are a big market. People will make the pilgrimage out to Canton, Ohio when he gets inducted. That means more money for the Hall of Fame that actually operates independent of the NFL. So let's get that out of the way. The player himself, very good football player. You win 2 Super Bowls. Not a lot of quarterbacks have done that. I understand that. But as I brought up the point, it's not from a hating perspective. As he just said, Eli was a good quarterback. Compare him to his brother, who every single year felt like he made the Pro Bowl and was shattering records. Oh, but only won 1 Super Bowl. Stop the madness. Peyton was so much a better quarterback here that you sort of ride on those coattails. When I look at Hall of Fame, you're not even supposed to have a debate on who's a Hall of Fame player. It should be a snap decision. Absolutely yes. Absolutely no. I don't want to hear about, look, 117 and 117 as a quarterback. That's ridiculous. You had a ton of interceptions. Did he step up big in a few moments? Yes, he did. But let's also understand this. The catalyst for the Giants winning Super Bowls was never Eli Manning. It was always the defense that got the credit for him. Did he make big plays in the Super Bowl? Won a great pass down the sideline to Manningham. Love that play. But how about the David Tyree play, which should have been a stone-cold interception, which stuck to a guy's helmet, which Eli gets credit for, a horrendous pass downfield. Again, I'm not slandering Eli. He's a good quarterback, but in no way, shape, or form, when you bring up Hall of Fame, he should automatically be in. But as I said, he will eventually get in because the Hall of Fame would love to put his bust there. People will go there and pay money to see Eli Manning as that monster franchise, the New York Giants. Yeah. That's my piece.
Frankly, I actually think he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer as well. Whether he is deserving of it, but the notoriety behind it, I think allows him in on the first try. I don't care as much about the Hall of Fame as some do in either sports or in any of the sports. I do believe Eli Manning, because of his notoriety, his place in the grandeur that the Manning name has in the National Football League, given the fact he has won 2 Lombardi trophies and 2 Super Bowl MVPs, I think that will be the difference maker to have Eli Manning be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't really get involved in these long sports debates, but I do hear your points as well, DRS. Any more thought on Eli Manning before we talk about actual football this week and the start of week number 12?
No, and by the way, awesome guy.
Yeah.
Funny as all get out. Him and his brother make great content here. So if he gets in, I'm not going to be upset by it. But this also comes from, well, Donnie, you're a hater of the Giants. Have you ever heard me talk about Donovan McNabb when they try to bring him up for the Hall of Fame? Absolutely not. And I say multiple times. I would go into Lincoln Financial Field and look up in the rafters and see 5 retired. Like, how the hell did that happen? So I'm not a hater. If I'm hating on my own team more than anybody else. I'm just calling it for what it's worth. When I see something I don't like, I'll call it out. Simple as that.
Reports of a South Jersey man climbing the Raptors at the link to rip down a certain retired jersey.
Oh, that would be
That's
good.
Donnie Wright's side. All right, let's get you ready for an AFC North divisional duel to kick off week number 12 of this NFL regular season. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the team atop the division right now in the AFC North. 8-2 is the record. A cover in all 8 victories. 5 wins in a row, including all 4 with Russell Wilson under center. The Steelers, 3.5-point favorite only against the 2-8 Cleveland Browns, who have covered just once in any of their 8 losses this season. Let's start with the numbers, DRS. Pittsburgh, a little bit more than a field goal favorite. That could be crucial for a game that features a total now of just 36.5, but actually up ever so slightly in the last hour to 37 and a hook. It was 35.5 earlier this week. Joe Ranieri and I took an early look at this game, and he mentioned some potential gnarly weather tonight on the shores of Lake Erie. Wind, wintry mix, gusts up to 40 miles per hour. It's why I already bet the under. I might have got a bad number at 35 and a hook, the odds makers might tell you.
Yeah, everybody. Usually what happens, too, is you'll get it on TV in game time. Like, oh, look, it doesn't look that bad in the warm-ups 3 hours before the game. But it is going to be some not great weather in a season. We've had fantastic weather for a lot of NFL action, particularly in the month of November. Now, let's just understand this. It's a Thursday night football game. It's a division rival. It's colder weather, some rain maybe, and some wind. That doesn't signal like, oh, my goodness, let's get after it. And also keep in mind, I think the dam is broken on the Cleveland Browns. Hey, let's get excited. We beat the Ravens. Unbelievable. The bottom is falling. They've gotten smashed the past 2 weeks. But Jameis Winston is such a tough quarterback, Ben, to bet an under with, because you understand this. He's just going to throw it all over the place, good and bad, which means interceptions, which means touchdown passes. But understand this from a Pittsburgh Steelers perspective. Their goal is not in college football to stay like in the top 12 and have an impressive victory. If they win this 7-6, it'll be one of the best wins of their season. Thursday night on the road against a division rival that you tend to dominate. I don't know if we're getting the high-flying theatrics from the Steelers offense. This sounds like, let's not make mistakes here. Cleveland is a bad football team. Let's get a win any way we can, because that high of the win on Sunday against the Ravens, you can't lose momentum with a terrible loss against the Browns. That's how I'm looking at this game, Ben.
My natural inclination, DRS, to see that total earlier in the week in the mid-30s was what? Pittsburgh has gone over in 4 of their 5 wins here in a row. We'll continue to break down Thursday night next. We get you ready for week number 12 and a Thursday night football game in division in the AFC North tonight in the land between the Browns and the Steelers. Again, back to the total and the number. 3.5-point spread in favor of the Steelers, who are 8-2 and sit atop the AFC North, a cover in all 8 wins. That total on its way up, 37.5. But again, we are expecting wind and rain and maybe a little bit of a wintry mix. Gusts up to 40 miles per hour. sustained winds anywhere around 23 to 25 miles per hour. Every offense around the National Football League, DRS, will tell you the thing that impacts game plan and offensive flow more than anything, it's not rain, it's not snow, it's wind. And to your point about Jameis Winston and a total in the mid-30s, I was like, absolutely not. I'm going to bet the over in this game when I first saw it. But if they are unable to pass the ball efficiently or effectively and they turn to the ground game, I still think I lean under tonight.
And again, nobody's going to fault you for that, too. And if this was a Sunday game in bad weather, maybe be a little bit tougher because you get that extra week of preparation. You get a little bit more relaxed. You're coming off your games last week, but that's not the case. It's a Thursday night football game. And quite frankly, these teams aren't used to playing yet in the cold weather, in the messy weather. So it's almost like it's going to be the first time for each one of these teams to say, you know what? Look at this. It might be rainy. It might be slippery. How do we handle it? So that makes it a little bit tougher. And also, as I said previously, we're not looking for a showmanship win out of the Pittsburgh Steelers. 13-9, they would love to get out of there, secure that victory, and keep moving along in their season. Now, granted, the Cleveland Browns would love to pull the upset on the Pittsburgh Steelers as a hated rival. They don't do it that often, so this would be a big shock, but also understand the, test at hand. The Steelers are playing for a lot. It's hard for an NFL team like, hey, let's just play the spoiler, and we're not even in the month of December or at Thanksgiving yet. That's terrible. That's just a bad football team. I would be surprised if the Steelers lost this game, but at the same time, I'm not really running to the window to lay the 3.5, but I do agree with you. Right. Probably more of a lean towards the under, but again, the worst under quarterback in the history of football to me. I don't care about the statistics, what he is with his over-under. You say Jameis Winston, or you say like Baker Mayfield, let's take the under, that sends shivers down your spine, man. It does.
I would agree. 5th total this year for Pittsburgh, sub 40, under in the first 2, over in the previous 2. I'll tell you why in just a moment. Lowest total of the year on paper for Cleveland. Their previous 2 totals that were under the number of 40 stayed under that pregame total. Cleveland an underdog in 7 of 10 games this year. 2 outright victories as a dog in Jacksonville, and of course the upset over Baltimore and Jameis Winston's first start of the season. Just 3-4 against the spread. The only cover in any of the 8 L's this year for Cleveland a couple of weeks ago against the Philadelphia Eagles in the game that Deshaun Watson was injured. Pittsburgh not just covering in all 8 games this year, DRS, but as a favorite post Ben Roethlisberger. That starts in 2022, 12-7 against the spread, which is really good. In fact, second best in the NFL in that span, only behind the best cover team in the National Football League in the last 3.5 years, that being the Detroit Lions. So as we look now at the evolution of this Pittsburgh team, one of the reasons, DRS, again, that I looked at the total in the mid-30s early this week and said, no chance, I'm betting the over, because of what Pittsburgh has been with Russell Wilson. You can see the numbers. It wasn't bad with Justin Fields. They were winning football games. They have won all football games with Russ as the starter, averaging more than 27 points per game, up by nearly a touchdown from the offensive and scoring production earlier in the year. As I said, 5th total of the season for Pittsburgh, sub 40. First 2 under when Fields started. The second 2 with Russ under center. Both have gone well over.
And also, take a look at Cleveland, the way they played their games this year. Remove the Ravens game at 29 points. Let's just say that's the outlier at this point. 17, 18, 15, 16, 13, 16, 14, 10, and 14. That's the points numbers here for the Cleveland Browns. Now, you could say, yes, a lot of that was under Deshaun Watson. Well, how about the past 2 games, 10 points and 14 points out of Jameis? And also keep in mind, stripped down of a lot of good football players that have either, been injured and or been traded, a la Amari Cooper. It's not a great team, and they're going to go up against a very good pass rush for the Pittsburgh Steelers that's going to be pinning their ears back. And Arthur Smith, in a game like this, is not being told by Mike Tomlin, get out there, let's get 3 touchdowns in the first half and run away with this game. It's let's get in the field goal range to use our kicker who makes every single kick, which again will be tougher to make kicks in this environment outdoors in this weather. Everything is pointing to an under outside of just saying the name. Jameis Winston at this point, you see the team totals and you say, you know what, Donnie, you like team totals. How about the Steelers to score 21 points? It does make sense until you realize you're probably going to need the full 3 touchdowns, but also 3 extra points in this weather. There's nothing worse than saying, Donnie, how did it go? We scored 3 touchdowns. I missed 1 extra point. I lost my team total. That's terrible to have. So even that 20.5 feels like a trick number for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And you know what's a little bit interesting about Pittsburgh's new OC, Arthur Smith, and his 3 years in Atlanta as their offensive schemer as well. He was often, people got mad at him, especially when Bijan Robinson came to the A, for not running the football enough. The Steelers are running the football on 52.5% of their plays, second most rushing play percentage, second highest rushing play percentage, only behind Philadelphia. So how does the weather, how does the game plan affect the props for tonight? Russell Wilson, 186.5. Jameis Winston, 217 and a hook. That's Jameis Winston football, baby, minus 198 to throw a pick.
And by the way, he's probably going to throw a pick, but also that 217.5. Like, if I think the Steelers are winning, the MO shouldn't be for Cleveland. Let's run the football. Like, you're trying to just do a little bit of a spark in your season, not keep the game close. So that Jameis number is quite interesting because I do think he's going to throw it all over the place. The question is, how many of those will be completed to his own team is going to be the question mark. And also, I know we're going to talk about this game a little bit more in the next segment. I got a Joe Frizo special in this one that's paying out at a big price right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook in the props market here. How about that, team?
Oh, everybody's getting down with the numbers. By the way, Jameis Winston in his 3 starts, at least 235 yards. In the win against the Ravens, 334. Last week against the Saints, 395. 6 touchdowns to 3 interceptions, all 3 INTs in that loss to the Chargers, who are the best scoring defense in the NFL, Pittsburgh's second best scoring defense. More on the props in the Joe Frizo special next. We continue to look at the prop market for a Thursday night football game that only features a total of 37 and a hook and some gnarly weather expected tonight in Cleveland. So, Donnie, naturally the thought would be, all right, both running backs are going to have a lot of usage and production tonight. Najee Harris, the number is actually rather minimal, 66.5. Nick Chubb, 52 and a hook. How are you approaching the ground game tonight in front of the dog pound?
It's kind of tough because when you look at and again, it's based on a season here, right? Pro Football Focus, the second-ranked run defense in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns. So it sort of fits the MO, whereas if you're going to have a sloppy game, you're going to try to run the football, but you're not exactly trying to abuse a weakness on the opposing team's defense as opposed to throwing it around. And then again, Arthur Smith isn't going to throw it around tonight. This game will probably be much closer to the vest. It's just a matter of how Cleveland actually plays. But if we're looking at the 2 starting running backs, right? Najee Harris, 66.5. Sometimes you keep it simple. He's going to be running the football in the second half because they'll probably have the lead. It'll be close. He's a talented running back. I understand that. Nick Chubb on the opposite side, how long we have the lead for, but also maybe you don't have to have the lead. You're not down 2 and 3 scores where it's like, hey, they can't run the football anymore. You just have to pass. But the way I'm actually approaching the running back position is not from an actual ground game. It's actually from the air. And you don't need a lot. Yesterday, you take a look at some of these running backs and say, okay, who would you lean towards? Is it Najee in the pass game? Is it Nick Chubb in the pass game? No, it's not. It's Jaylen Warren. He was 13.5 his reception prop yesterday. Today, it's 14.5. The reason I bring this up is if we are looking at maybe it will be a little bit testy throwing the football downfield, what's a quarterback's best friend in bad weather? Snap the football, pass rush comes, dump it off to the running back. I think Jaylen Warren, from a running back perspective, for me, gets most of my attention, not even in the running game, but the passing game here. But I can't fault you if you take Najee. He's going to get the carries. The one thing you're not going to have, Ben, at the end of this game is like, man, I took Najee. He only got 9 carries in this game. No, he's going to have a significant amount of carries, which should get him to 66.5. But as I pointed out, one of the better run defenses in the NFL, it's the Cleveland Browns. So sort of a tough uphill climb there for me.
To start off this 5-game win streak, Najee Harris above the century mark in 3 consecutive. He has had less than 70 in the last 2. Jaylen Warren, 4 consecutive games of at least 41 yards on the ground. His rushing yards prop 33 and a hook, and to your point, DRS, 15-plus receiving yards in 3 of the last 4 for Warren as well. Nobody has been happier to see Russell Wilson as his starting quarterback than the guy that leaked that Russ was going to be the starter for Pittsburgh. That's George Pickens, 58.5, his receiving yards prop tonight.
Yeah, and again, that's what you're trying to struggle with. You know George Pickens is going to get the bulk of that deep shots down the sideline. What can you even it's bad weather, maybe they don't want to pass the football, but you know he's getting at least 3 of those 40-yard lobs down the sideline with a legitimate chance to go under. But also, if you're saying, and this sometimes comes into it, I'm not going to be betting this game early. And I've done this a few times this year. When I hear weather's in the forecast, I need to get eyes and boots on the ground at some of those pregame telecasts where it's like, oh, it looks terrible, or the rain is coming down, or an updated weather saying, you know what, by the second quarter, you're not going to be able to see the TV screen. There's going to be so much wind, rain, and or snow here. That's a factor. Are you looking from a Browns perspective as opposed to George Pickens being the number one, where Jerry Jeudy has caught the bulk of that? And how much throwing will they actually do? For me, it seems like it will be spread out just a little bit more. Pratt Fryermuth, 18.5 yards. Again, bad weather, short throws, they make the most sense to me. But if you are looking from the opposite side, David Njoku, 45.5, maybe. But I do think Jerry Jeudy has a chance at 47.5 to maybe break one where it's like a 25 or 30-yard play to sort of eat into that chunk at 47.5. And you know Jameis Winston is going to be throwing it all over the place. Not all that high on this game from a wideout perspective, but if I had to lean on one, it's probably Pickens getting the bulk of those deep ball shots tonight for the Steelers.
I'm just not overly high on the passing game tonight, given the weather, given my thoughts on it. But Cedric Tillman has gone over his number in 4 consecutive games, including all 3 with Jameis Winston as the starting quarterback. Had 75-plus in the first 2 Jameis Winston starts. Last week, it was a big Jerry Jeudy game in the Big Easy. 142 yards and a touchdown. 89-yard touchdown grab, that big play threat. One of the longest passing plays in the history of this Cleveland organization. So an AFC North divisional duel. Last week's win for Pittsburgh against Baltimore was their first divisional game of the year. And Donnie, they now have a game-and-a-half lead for the top spot. You would expect 8-2 record, game-and-a-half lead, direct head-to-head tiebreaker against the team you are battling for first place with. You'd probably be minus 500 to win the division. It's only minus 160. Will the Steelers hold on? Will Pittsburgh win the AFC North?
Yeah, I do think Pittsburgh has a legitimate chance, but you're talking about a tough schedule for the Steelers on out, but also a tough schedule for the Ravens. Give me the Pittsburgh Steelers at this point, and I'll leave this before the break. Najee Harris, I'm going to alt him to over 40. Alt him.
That's good. More on the early line next. Live right here on the early line. It is a Thursday. It is hour number 3. We continue to preview Thursday night football that kicks off week number 12, starting tonight in Cleveland. Supposed to be some gnarly weather on the banks of Lake Erie between the Browns and the Steelers, and what could look to be an old-fashioned AFC North battle. What is the best bet? We'll hear from the people in just a matter of moments. We'll get the prop perspective with Tom Vecchio in the second half of this final hour, and of course our final breakdowns and picks before we head into this Thursday afternoon. DRS, one final hour in store. It's been a fun show so far today. I can only expect the same in the next 58 minutes.
Absolutely. We're going to keep that energy high for hour number 3. Even though we might have some bad mojo weather in Cleveland, doesn't mean we can't find those winners. So we're going to make sure we find those and keep the level high. Laughs, maybe a couple laughs in hour number 3. You never know. You never know.
Yeah. I absolutely believe that is going to be the case. Just looking at a couple things that our producer, Joe Frizo, has set my way.
What you trying to sneak in NBA? Stuff. Hour number 3, what's he doing?
No. Well, you know, we've got a couple of college basketball games to talk about next. Today officially begins.
Sounds like a solo
Feast
mission.
Week. We're gonna have games in. We're gonna have games in hotel ballrooms. It is the beauty of Feast Week in the early slate of this college basketball season. I did want to make sure that Syracuse and Texas at the Barclays Center was there tonight. A couple of NBA handicaps to break down with your 2 premier NBA handicappers on this network. But before all of that, DRS, we wanted to hear from the people. Of course, Thursday night football, the start of week number 12, the Steelers on a 5-game win streak. The Browns just 2-8, but looking to play spoiler in the AFC North once again, like they did 3 weeks ago against the Baltimore Ravens. So what is the best bet for Thursday night football? That's what we had to ask you in Fade the Public. At Sports Grid on Twitter, what is the best bet for Thursday night football? Is it the Steelers laying a field goal and a hook on the road in Cleveland, the Browns as the home underdog, the over 36.5, or the under 36 and a hook? The overwhelming majority, DRS, more than 48% of the votes, back in the Steelers on the road. It makes sense. Pittsburgh has won 5 games. They are 8-2, sitting atop the AFC North with a cover in all 8 victories this season.
Yes, and here's what we're looking at from this poll, right? You have one good football team, one bad football team. I think you know where those votes are probably going. And if we told you in an environment where you're having colder temperatures, a chance of snow, rain, sleet, and wind, you probably figure where most of the public is going. And you can't fault them for that. Also, if we're taking a look at this game where you think it's a bad football team in September, early October, there's still a lot to play for. In this game, the Steelers have everything to play for. Cleveland, nothing to play for outside of we're taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers, their rival, and yes, we would like to beat them. So for myself, the -3.5 and the 48% of the current votes coming in, that's the way I went with the Steelers -3.5. I can't honestly say, well, I don't know if the Browns can win, but I think they can keep it close. Ludicrous. I think I know the Steelers are going to win this game. So if that line is 3.5, I got to take the Pittsburgh Steelers.
DRS, they are 12-7, that being Pittsburgh, since the start of 2022 against the number as the favored side. The reason I referenced 2022, that's post-Big Ben era in Pittsburgh. They are the second best cover team when booked as a favorite in the last 2.5 years, which might be surprising to some because you think of the Steelers, you think of last week, field goal underdog in a divisional duel, winning a game they were unexpected to outright. The Steelers are a perfect 4-0 straight up this year as the underdog, but 4-2 both straight up and against the spread as the favorite this season. Again, 5 consecutive wins for Pittsburgh, 4 straight with Russell Wilson under center, a cover in all 4 of those. Total at 36.5. I voted for and have already bet the under when it was 35 and a hook earlier this week. Again, not just rain and potentially some snow and a wintry mix tonight on the shores of Lake Erie in front of the Dog Pound, but a lot of wind. Sustained gusts, sustained winds at 23 to 25 miles per hour, gusts up to 40 miles per hour. And if you can't run against Pittsburgh, trusting in Jameis Winston to throw the football a ton to try to keep Cleveland in this game or put points up on the board might be a precarious situation.
No, and it might be, and you're right. And sometimes we overblow the weather situation, which I'm hoping is going to be the case tonight, because then you can get some advantages there in the passing game and the running game, and certainly just to score points. But for me, I'm going to be stacking up some alt parlays, which you're going to get good numbers. Here's the thing we take a look at as handicappers. Yes, we love games that we expect a lot of points. Let's just say this number was 52.5 tonight. Well, then the prop bets would be adjusted accordingly. Instead of getting low 60s for a starting running back, you're getting high 80s and low 90s for a wide receiver such as George Pickens. Instead of being in that 50 to 60s range, you're looking at 70s to 80s. So you can sort of manage those expectations where you don't need a big night. We're talking about like your quarterbacks, good quarterbacks in Russell Wilson, under 200 yards. Jameis Winston, who his game plan is not, I want to hand the football off. I want to throw it all over the place, whether or not I have good wide receivers or if I'm playing a good defense or not. So you do get those discounted bargains. You just have to look in the right spots tonight. And for me, handicapping this game, again, I think the Steelers win. I think there's a chance this game stays under. But I need to get my eyes on these forecasts once they come into real time, an hour to an hour and a half before the game. And also, the best part about this bet on the FanDuel Sportsbook, betting live game situations. If you see the rain is starting to come down, yes, you can bet unders. If you see the rain is cleared up and say, hey, look, we might have a clear window for the next hour and a half, maybe you start to bet some of those in-game overs. So there are ways to approach this game where you can make some money and it makes some sense.
And the boys will be live tonight. That's Donnie, right?
Oh, yeah. The boys are live right now, people. You see that? BWS cuts out. Yes, let's give a good promo right now. The boys will be live in studio, Pro Football Today, in-game live, going over this game. And certainly, you're going to want to watch this one because, as I pointed out, you are going to get the pregame analysis that you absolutely need. But during the in-game analysis, you're also going to get that where you can level up and try to make some money. But let's be honest about this game and the situation and the season here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've said so many times, I think Pittsburgh's going to win tonight. But if you're looking on the season, that then elevates them to their 9th win of the season. And every game is going to be so meaningful for them going up against the Baltimore Ravens. But look at the schedule as it plays out here for them. The Browns, the game tonight, I think they win. Then you're going to get the Bengals, followed by the Browns again. But look at this run. At the Eagles, at the Ravens, Chiefs, and then the Bengals to end the season. And by the way, don't throw the Bengals out just yet, because if the Bengals can absolutely beat the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2 weeks where the Bengals are coming off a bye, that's huge. And then get them to wrap around the end of the season. You know me. I'm still very high on the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that schedule is not going to do you any favors. And if we're just focusing on the Baltimore Ravens and where they need to be, it's no cakewalk for them either. The Ravens currently sit at 7-4, trying to chase down the Pittsburgh Steelers, whom they've lost to in the previous week. Look at their schedule. On the road against the Chargers, the Philadelphia Eagles. You're going to get a layup against the Giants. But how about this? Steelers, Texans, 2 of those 3 games to end the season. Theoretically, if they don't play well, we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens. That's troublesome. 7-4 could turn into 7-5 this weekend. Then you get the Eagles, which could turn into 7-6. And keep in mind that Eagles game, you, talking about the Ravens, play Monday Night Football on a short week on the road where you absolutely have to fly back and play them. That could be a tough spot here. But I'm looking forward to tonight. I think Russ has a solid game. Arthur Smith calls a complete game for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I just think Jameis Winston is probably going to turn the football over a little bit too much. Give me the Pittsburgh Steelers to cover the 3.5, and I'm going to invest a little bit later in some of these prop bets. It's the early line. It's Thursday morning. We continue our fun next. Don't go anywhere.
TV Tom Vecchio on a Thursday to provide the prop perspective for a new week around the National Football League as it starts tonight in Cleveland. The Steelers and the Browns in AFC North battle. Pittsburgh holding on to that top spot in the division. Vecchio, how are you going to spend your Thursday night knowing you're not going to be in studio with Donnie Rightside in place of Joe Lisi alongside Kevin Walsh? Of course, we know you're on the pregame and the postgame show for everything on Thursday Night Football. But how are you going to watch the game without Donnie, chirping you to your right?
I'm going to watch it rooting in Najee Harris TD because that's where I'll be on tonight. But, hopefully I'm a good luck charm for that as well as I was last week for the Eagles because apparently every time the Eagles play and Joe Lisi is there, they lose. So I guess I have to be there for every Eagles game. But like you said, we're in for a classic AFC North matchup. There's also a lot of weather tonight. We are in for certainly a game that may feature a lack of scoring.
So, Vecchio, I think it's a great point, too, because the weather does impact any handicap you take into a football game at this point of the year. It is late November. We're 1 week out from Turkey Day. But as Donnie has said, we've had some great weather all season long, both in college and NFL football. Not really tonight, at least based on the predicted forecast. Temperature around 25, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Winds around 23 to 25 miles per hour. Some rain into a wintry mix on the shores of Lake Erie. In gusts up to 40 miles per hour. So, Vecchio, as you dive into the numbers to see Pittsburgh as a 3.5-point favorite and a total for a short week Thursday night game at only 36 and a hook, and you take the weather into your handicap, where do you begin?
It's certainly tough. We would like to say that Russell Wilson and Winston, especially Winston, who's been throwing the ball like a lot at high volumes, actually was pretty good last week. You would like to say they get to 200 yards each. Like, we're not expecting a whole lot, but that may not be the case tonight. And this could be a big ground game for both teams. And granted, Nick Chubb hasn't done a whole lot. He hasn't been rushing at a high rate. He hasn't been rushing at a high volume. Like, they may need him and Jerome Ford to step up to do things alongside Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. So if you were a fan of running backs, this is the game to work in some type of, same game parlay where everyone's going for like 25 plus yards, something around there. Like, that's what we could be looking at. I know a lot of people want to be interested in David Njoku, which I am personally, or George Pickens on the other side, Cedric Wilson, like these players that need to step up. They may not actually be seeing a high rate of passing tonight. So the weather and the short week, the tough defense, especially on the Pittsburgh side, impacts everything tonight.
It is going to have an impact. Just looking at some of the weather reports here, it does look like the major part of the winds will be after the game, if that makes sense. Winds anywhere between 10 to 15 miles an hour during the game. But once you start to look at that time where it's like 11 p.m., 12 p.m., which the game will probably be over, that's when it starts to increase 15 to 20 miles per hour, which always makes it interesting because wind can change at any time. Hey, it looks like it's going to be after the game. Maybe it picks up early third quarter. One team has a lead. That's something to play off of, which brings us right to the quarterback props. Jameis Winston, 217.5 as his passing prop. Russell Wilson, in a game where his team is favored, is 186.5. And if you're looking for passing touchdowns, you are getting some bargains here tonight. Now, granted, the juice is heavy, but we typically look, Tom, at 1.5 touchdown passes. Both of the quarterbacks on FanDuel today listed at a half of a touchdown pass. Winston minus 240 and Russell Wilson minus 235. How do we play the quarterbacks tonight?
I don't mind going over on attempts for Wilson or Winston just because they may be short passes, and I think that could, impact of who we target in the passing game. And I got to be honest, I don't mind the Russell Wilson over TD because I have more faith in the Steelers, their ability to move the ball down the field. And whether they get to the 5 or the 10-yard line and hopefully Najee Harris rushes one in, but then maybe Pat Freiermuth steps up, or that's where we get George Pickens. So I don't mind getting one touchdown out of Russell Wilson, but him flying over his number, getting 250 yards, that's not something I see happen. When it comes to Jameis Winston, again, if they're going to be playing from behind, and we know that the Steelers' rush defense is awesome. They're only allowing, 90 rushing yards per game this season. So if they're not able to move the ball on the ground, and again, Nick Chubb isn't as effective as he once was, the attempts for Winston could be there, even if they're going to be short attempts.
Yeah, absolutely so. And you're going to trust in Jameis to throw the football. You see that number, minus 198, to throw an interception. But in 2 of the 3 games, Winston has been clean. It's just that he threw 3 interceptions 2 Sundays ago against the LA Chargers. Good running defenses on both sides, but Vecchio, given the wind and the weather, we can expect a hefty ground attack, especially for Pittsburgh. What is your approach to either Najee Harris or Nick Chubb tonight?
It's got to be Harris. It's got to be Harris TD. Harris over 66.5 yards. He has 63 plus in 4 of the last 5 games. He's been over 100 yards 3 times. He's going to be on the ground tonight. That's what they want to do. And, whether it's the matchup, we saw Taysom Hill run all over the Browns last week. And I'm not saying that Najee Harris is the same type of runner, or they're going to be scheming up the same type of plays as Taysom Hill had last week. But Kamara still had a big game. I think this is the spot for the Steelers just to go as straightforward as possible and pick up a divisional win, pick up a spot where the Ravens are certainly in a difficult matchup on the road versus the Chargers. And this is the chance for them to grab a little bit of breathing room theoretically, especially if the Ravens do lose. This is a big game for the Steelers. So I want to be on Harris TD, Harris over the 66.5 yards. Chubb, the attempts, I'm interested in Chubb. He hasn't been up that high. He hasn't been to 15 attempts this season, so I'm a little bit hesitant on that. He's going to play a role, and again, Jerome Ford will also play a role for the Browns tonight.
Let's take a look at some of those wide receivers out here. George Pickens, the leader in the clubhouse at the FanDuel Sportsbook in yardage tonight, listed at 58.5. The leader here for the Cleveland Browns, Jerry Jeudy, at 47.5, closely followed by Cedric Tillman and David Njoku. From a wide receiver perspective, Tom, are we focused more on the Steelers or the Cleveland Browns here?
I think it's got to be the Browns for me. I think a lot of people will be interested in George Pickens, especially going to his touchdown prop, just because it's sitting up at plus 220. But again, I'm not sure how many yards he can get there. So I can see him going under his yards, under his receptions, but still getting into a touchdown. Because again, I said I have faith that the Steelers move the ball downfield. David Njoku, I really like tonight. And again, the weather is going to play an issue, but 44.5 receiving yards, I think, is a number he should be able to get to. He has a low 4.5 ADOT, so he's really not getting too deep downfield. So if we're going to be working with these shorter passes, again, they don't want the wind to impact the passing. This is where Winston could look. Also factor in, TJ Watt's on the outside, so they're going to be bringing the pressure if the Browns are forced into this passing game script. So he's going to have to get the ball out quickly, and that's where David Njoku will come into play. So it's kind of twofold with the weather and just the good Steelers defense on the other side.
81 yards on 9 grabs, 9 targets for Njoku last week when Jameis threw for nearly 400 in New Orleans. Cedric Tillman, another guy that has gone over his number tonight with at least 47 yards in all 3 starts that Jameis Winston has made. It is difficult, Vecchio, to have a real understanding of how lethal a passing attack, even with Jameis Winston, can be given some of the projected weather and wind tonight in Cleveland. Let's show the top props just to run through it one more time. Vecchio, hone down on these numbers and exactly why we're betting all of these tonight for Thursday night.
Yeah, I would also say that there's a good way to approach the Harris. Harris TD plus a Steelers victory in a same game parlay, you can get up at about plus 160. I think that's relatively straightforward. You want to add in the yards, you want to subtract one of those. I think there's multiple different ways to attack being high on Najee Harris tonight. Again, that's the way I want to go. We also got to say, the Steelers defense, they're got to be live for a touchdown tonight, right? Up at plus 650.
Yeah.
Just given the fact that the weather, Jameis throwing interceptions, the pressure with TJ Watt, I think the Steelers defense is absolutely live for a touchdown tonight. I don't want to be betting on kicker props, as I know a lot of people like to do, but the wind would factor things in. So back away from those, maybe take a little bit of a sprinkle on a Steelers defensive touchdown tonight.
Vecchio, finally here, looking at the AFC North. Pittsburgh 8-2, game-and-a-half lead in front of Baltimore, and currently the direct head-to-head tiebreaker against the Ravens. Of course, this a divisional duel. The Browns have already beaten Baltimore once this year. When all is said and done at the end of the season, who wins the AFC North?
It's got to be the Steelers. The wins, the tiebreakers, their strength of schedule moving forward, they have a chance to pick up a big win tonight, and I think the Ravens have some tough matchups coming up. I will certainly look them to make the playoffs, but not win the division.
Listen, neither of those two teams, an easy slate to end out the year, is going to be important to see how it plays out. TV Tom, we appreciate the time as always. More from Thursday night next. Live right here on the early line on Sports Grid. It is a Thursday. That means the start of a new week in the National Football League. Week number 12 kicks tonight in Cleveland between the Browns and the Steelers. Divisional duel in the AFC North. Pittsburgh in first in the division with an 8-2 record, 5 consecutive wins, all 4 with Russell Wilson as their starting quarterback. A cover in all 4, a cover in all 5 on the win streak. In fact, a cover in all 8 victories this season. Meanwhile, for Cleveland DRS, another disappointing season that entered with optimism. 2-8 and only 1 cover in any of those 8 losses this year about a month ago against Philadelphia. We have talked a lot about the weather, as you shared within the last hour. Some of the winds dipping down a little bit during the actual game, 10 to 15 miles per hour, which is going to be helpful, but rain and some sleet and some snow expected throughout Thursday night football. Knowing the weather, knowing the numbers, 3.5-point spread in favor of the Steelers. Total at 36.5. How do you approach this short week Thursday night game?
Still going to be with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And you know me, usually my MO is home team or no team on Thursday nights. But, you know, this year a little bit different. Been betting some of those road teams and having some success. And I think it continues because how much of a fight do we have from the Cleveland Browns tonight? There are going to be a lot of Steeler fans in those stands. And also, if you're Cleveland, yes, you want to see your favorite team beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. But also, are you selling your tickets because you don't even want to sit out there in the rain, sleet, and wind tonight? There's probably a factor going into that. But I also do think that the Steelers are built and more equipped in the bad weather than, let's per se, the Cleveland Browns. Usually it's the great equalizer, Ben. We're like, hey, give me some rain, give me some wind, take the underdog. But that's not what the Steelers want to do. Russell Wilson will be more than happy to throw the ball 19 times in this game tonight, have a couple completions, don't turn it over, run the football, play good defense, and come away with a victory. And also, you saw the past 2 games that Cleveland played after that Baltimore Ravens victory. They've been atrocious on offense and giving up chunk yards on defense here. The Steelers, to me, will win this game. And you know, hey, I'm worried about that 3.5. If it's windy, rainy conditions, are you really as worried about that 3.5 here? Maybe you don't kick as many field goals. Maybe you miss an extra point or two. So I don't look at that half point coming into it as you would maybe in a dome situation. If you think the Steelers are going to win this game, you got to be just laying the 3.5.
Chris Boswell has been sensational this year for Pittsburgh. Dustin Hopkins not as great on the other side for the Browns. Again, Cleveland an underdog in 7 of 10 games, 2-5 straight up, 3-4 ATS. Pittsburgh as a favorite since the start of 2022. Second best cover team in the NFL, 12-7 against the number, only behind the Detroit Lions. Quickly on the quarterbacks, DRS, Russell Wilson, number sub 200, was great in his first 2 starts. The numbers have trickled down a little bit, but still victories. Jameis Winston over that in all 3 starts he has made for Cleveland. But, of course, I think the numbers incorporating the expected poor weather tonight.
Yes, and it does, but you also are getting some discounts. Like sometimes you look and say, okay, well, I can't take those those players individually to throw a touchdown pass. But at the end of the game, look, we're not talking about a total, Ben, at 21.5. It's still in the mid-30s, which means your expectations are 4 to 5 touchdowns in this game. So why can't each one of those quarterbacks throw a single touchdown pass? You parlay those together. Now you start to cook with something that makes some sense and easily attainable. But it's just a factor of how you think that game is going to play out. Because as I say, I'm not going to be betting a lot of props here early in the day until I see what the weather conditions are. But if we're being honest, hey, look, rain is one thing, sleet is one thing. But if you're going to couple that with 25-mile-an-hour sustained winds, that's a tough night. But if we're going to get 10 to 12 mile an hour winds through the majority of the game. That's a normal football game anywhere. And yes, these players have played in rainy game situations. So I don't want to completely shut the valve off for points tonight, but sometimes you do get some of those game changes, and betting it live makes all the difference. How many times have you watched a game where you bet live in game because a player just got injured or a quarterback did? Hey, that could change the complexion of the game. How about when a team takes offense in late third quarter and go, wow, it's really raining now and the winds have really picked up? Well, you're not going to say, you know what, now's the time to hit the gas pedal and take the team that's favored to extend the lead here. Some of those things will play out tonight. I'm just hoping the weather isn't that bad, because you might get some gems tonight if the weather isn't at all impactful as we think it could be.
It's a great point, DRS. I bet the under 35.5 earlier this week. I'm not loving my number at the moment because of the updated wind reports. I don't actually really care about rain or sleet or snow. I care about wind. And when earlier this week, even this morning, wind was projected around 25 miles per hour sustained, gusts up to 40 miles per hour. Great. That's what impacts an offense, the scheme, the passing attack, more than just some wet weather. DRS, you mentioned earlier in the show a prop bet or a parlay that our producer, Joe Frizo, would adore. I don't even know if we got to it, really. What is that number tonight?
And now, look, if we are expecting some weather conditions on two teams, want to establish the ground game. Let's just, and again, the focus probably going to Nick Chubb. In the past couple of years, it would never be the focus. But 5 yards apiece each quarter from the starting running backs, Nick Chubb on one side and also on the other side, Najee Harris. If they each get 5 yards per quarter rushing, that's plus 650. That's not plus 120, plus 142 to 1, plus 650. That's it. Like, how do you want to open a game when it might be bad weather? Handing the football off. Hey, one guy gets 6 yards, one guy gets 7 yards, and away you go. Now, granted, we understand how these things lose, and they're never automatic. But that price point, again, with a low total, but low totals usually mean you want to run the football in bad weather. Maybe it's something to look at for a fun bet. Plus 650 if you can hit that bet.
And you would expect the ground game to be a priority. Look at the attempts prop, even Jaylen Warren around 8.5 for his attempts. Here are the wideouts that will factor in. Again, to Donnie's point, if the wind is not nearly as bad tonight on a Thursday, you got to look to Cedric Tillman, David Njoku. George Pickens has had at least 74 receiving yards in every start made with Russell Wilson the previous 4. Donnie, the wide receiver named Keith Hardy, does that mean anything to you?
Keith Hardy. No, I don't know. Is that a Indiana maybe? Did a Hardy come from Indiana?
No.
I don't know.
No, Keith
idea.
Hardy from 2000 to 2002 had 110 receptions at the Pride of the Garden State. William Patterson.
I was going to say that, but I didn't think you would go there. Yeah. It's funny you said that name because it rang a bell.
Young slot receivers record, Don Seymour, who had 93 reception in his career, only to pale in comparison to Keith Hardy.
Yeah, by the way, I did get shafted on a couple of those catches there, so I go back on the tapes. I had 12 catches against Keenan in 1998, not 10 catches. So go back and rewind the tapes on that. I should have more numbers there. Ridiculous. Undercounted, underwhelming. Stop.
This is Ball. I miss you, man. See you Monday.